on session 3, wherein we will discuss about the two phases of the project initiation and project planning. Now, these two parts of the project cycle, project initiation and project planning, will consist about 60% of your time in project planning. Now, here in a graphical presentation, you will see again the difference between the project cycle and the system's life cycle. And you will see here that we are going to cover in the project cycle, project initiation and project planning, and for the systems development cycle, we're going to look into the concept, the requirements phase, and the design stage. Okay. Now, let's have a review of the milestones expected from each of the project management phase. Here in this matrix, you will see different views coming from the different international reference standards. You have the PMI, or the Project Management Book of Knowledge. You have Microsoft. You have the others like Prince2, Birdman. And in the other rows that you will see there, you will be reminded of the different project cycle results or milestones. And you will see there that in the first milestone for planning, the milestone is vision scope approved. For the second milestone for planning, you have project plan approved. For the execution or the implementation phase, the milestone is scope completed. And for ICT projects, you would see here a first use of the product. And lastly, for the closing out phase, you will see the product released, or it will now be ready for the integration in operations of the product released by the ICT project. You will also notice here that there are different names, but actually referring to a similar concept of planning. For example, in initiation could also be called envisioning in the Microsoft framework. And for the ratified unified system, you will have there the inception analysis. And for the Prince2, you have starting up a project and initiating a project. Others would view this as conceptualization or the research phase. For the planning part in the project cycle, this would be named as planning also for Microsoft, and for the rational unified system, it's called elaboration and design. And for Birdman, it's design and specification and prototyping. And for Prince2, it could be called planning and directing a project. So you will see there are different terms, but exactly meaning a similar approach or similar pattern. And you will see here in project and initiation, which is the first part of the project cycle, the aim is to establish the business case or the concept of the project. These activities under the initiation phase will include pre-identification of the project, what it will cover, for instance, in terms of the objectives, the approaches, the opportunities, the needs, and also you can use benchmarking tools for this, for you to know what exactly you would like to engage in this project. To follow also after you have identified the project or in the identification process, it would be good for you to conduct a feasibility study, conduct a problem analysis, identify solutions for the problem, and afterwards recommend solutions and options, describing implementation approach, and recommend some options. Now, you can start writing the business case or the project concept, which will include the vision and the scope of the project. Remember, the milestone of this phase is vision and scope must be approved, at least in principle. And for the next slide, you will see here a graphical presentation of where the project initiation and project planning is in terms of the process. Okay. In developing a project, there is an importance in looking at the environment. What is there in the planning side of government or in the national setting? What are the programs and policies? What are the social, political, cultural environment where the project will also operate or move? Once you have identified the project, you can now go to the planning stage, which is more detailed when it comes to the process. Now, in project initiation, you write the business case. You also write the concept. A project concept paper is the basis for making the decision to initiate a project. It is a brief statement summarizing the purpose, the approach, the necessary resources, the risks, and the impact of the proposed initiative. Now, concept statement is used to determine the proposed project can be successful based on current resource availability, the skill set, and the timelines. Now, project design, also which is part of project initiation, involves the formulation of the strategies and the activities. It involves three major processes: formulating project framework, detailing the implementation plan, and the visibility, or rather the viability analysis. Now, after that, you define the project framework. This involves the defining of the project's objectives, the targets based on the needs identified in the identification stage, and the strategies. This process is also known as project scoping. Now, the project framework provides an overview of the project. It describes the context of the project, usually the overall objective, which requires a long-term statement of the objectives, the benefits that you will get or what the target group will get from this project, and this is what we call the immediate objectives, and the strategies and the outputs expected that you will pursue during the time of the project, what will be the deliverables, and the resource requirements of the project. These are your project inputs. Now, you will learn this more if you're going to use the logical framework approach. If you remember, this is one of the international reference standards that we mentioned during session 1 when we are introducing you on the concepts of project management. Now, what's a logical framework approach? The logical framework approach, or the LFA, is developed by the USA, and their aid organization, the USAID, and utilized by many donor organizations by now. This will include, for instance, the OECD's Development Assistance Committee, the Nordic countries such as the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs or NORAD. In Canada, this approach, not only in development aid, but also in domestic public investments. The UN organizations, the technical cooperation of the German aid agencies and the Australian aid programs, and the European Commission, to name a few. Now, the logical framework approach is an analytical, presentational, and management tool. This will help planners and managers analyze the existing situation under which the activity is being presented or prepared, establish a logical hierarchy of means by which objectives will be reached, identify the potential risk to achieving the objectives, and what the sustainable outcomes are. It also establishes what and how are the outputs, the outcomes, how they will be best monitored and evaluated. If desired, it would be good to present a summary of the activity in a standard format and monitor and review activities during implementation. See here in the next slide, you will see that one, you have tools in the LFA, in the analysis phase, and in the planning phase. In the analysis phase, you have the stakeholder analysis. Remember, you have done some exercise during the second session. And in the second session, in our stakeholders analysis exercise, we identified and characterized potential major stakeholders and we assessed their capacity. Next is problem analysis. This is also another tool used, this time identifying the key problems, constraints and opportunities, determining cause and effects, and the relationships of both. You can also use the tool which is called objective analysis, wherein you develop solutions from the identified problems, identify means to end relationships. Now, next is a strategy analysis, which is identifying different strategies to achieve solutions and selecting the appropriate strategy. In the planning phase, you develop the logical framework matrix, defining the project structure, testing its internal logic and risks, formulating measurable indicators and success, and in activity scheduling, you determine the sequence and dependency of the activities, estimating their duration and assigning responsibility. As well, you do resource scheduling here. From activity schedules, you develop input schedules and a budget. Now let's have a problem tree sample. This will involve one of the tools which is called problem analysis. Now this is ideally an activity that should be done in group. The focus should have already been decided by this time, meaning what sort of topic or what sort of problem area are we going to consider. For instance, one of the problems felt in government is its inadequacy for government budget and releases, and this is critical to social services. What are other problems related to this problem? You will see here in the brainstorming exercise, there were a list of other problems that will result from asking the question why. Having this list list would also enable us to analyze and come up with a hierarchy of problems, showing the root cause of the problem and the other problems that branches from their root cause. Let us say that we already have identified the root of the problem that we wish to address. Let us translate these problems into an objective. To trace whether the need is already identified, and so with the ends and the means being addressed in the project, the logic is tested and undertaken on a vertical manner. From the top to bottom, we ask the question how. From bottom to top, we ask the question why. The problem tree tool enables one to identify the goals, the outcomes, the outputs that will be utilized to address the needs identified. Once you have identified the problems, what we can do is translate these problems into an objective. Here is an example of problem analysis wherein you will see that the problem is now translated into an objective. Okay, for example, insufficient expenditure management systems and processes translated into an objective as improving financial management systems and processes. Another problem identified could be planning and finance. Line agencies are unclear of their responsibilities. Now let's translate that into an objective, clearer roles and responsibilities of planning and finance line agencies. Now you can do that, so on and so forth, until you will also come up with the next tool, which is choosing the right strategy for your project. Now, objective analysis is likely to identify a number of interrelated approaches. These could be adopted to achieve a development impact. Strategy analysis involves 7 main steps. 1. Identify the different approaches in the objective tree. Remember the sample tree that was shown to you 2 slides away. Eliminate any objectives are clearly unachievable. Identify branches already being pursued by other development activities in the area. Assess the implications of the different strategies of different stakeholders. Assess the likely feasibility of the alternative strategies. Check the choice against which this criteria has been established and carry out a detailed risk analysis of the chosen strategy. Now, the key criteria to use in strategy analysis would be the social criteria, environmental criteria, the technical criteria, institutional criteria, and financial and economic criteria. Once you find viability of these criteria, set up and these objectives, then you have the right strategy. After which, you're now ready to plot the log frame matrix. A log frame matrix is a generic a matrix consisting of a 4-column and 4-row matrix. On the first column, you have the narrative summary. On the second column, you have the objectively verifiable indicators. On the third column, you have the means of verification. And the fourth column, the critical assumptions. Now, crossing with those columns, you have the goals, the purpose, the outputs, and the activities. You will notice this is the hierarchy of objectives that we have been speaking about earlier. Goals refer to your long-term objectives. Purpose refer to your immediate objectives. The outputs are the results that you will be gathering or reaping once you are already implementing the projects, and as well the activities that you have already identified in your activity matrix. And you will see there that there is also a box in the second column where you have to write down the inputs. Now, perhaps as a good strategy is to show you an activity or a sample of this log frame matrix. Here in this slide, you will see a sample of a log frame matrix filled up. Now, first and second slides will show you that there are different examples or exercises used for each goal, objective, and results. And these are all based, if you remember, the case scenario of the telecenter project. So here's an example of a log frame that is still needing a lot of improvement. But just to give you an exercise, let us check the logic horizontal and vertical of this project. How else can we improve this? Now, this sample is taken from the case scenario of the establishment of a telecenter in a community. You'll see here that the overall objective for Level 1, communities empowered to facilitate transition towards rich and sustainable life in the community. Here in the second column, you will see here the objectively verifiable indicators, which would be improved and increased level of participation of community in development and governance, participation in policy formulation, sustainability measure for telecenters are undertaken. And then the means of verification, which is the third column, looks into the national, local government records, the studies, newspapers, and websites where you can gather this information. Critical assumption would be national and local government continue to support telecenters. So that is your long-term objective as your Level 1. Level 2 will be your purpose, which is like 5 years from now. What would be the result of the exercise or the activity, the project activity? The purpose is to improve immediate conditions in the community. That will include livelihood, employment, health, education, social capital. And for you to verify and measure that, you might say there's a reduction of poverty, significance in the income of women and men, increased productivity, growth in business, reducing infant maternal mortality rates, decreased affliction of common diseases, increased education, performance and literacy rates, increased trust in the capability of the community. Now, all these are your medium of measurements. And how do you verify this? What is your means of verification? You can look into revenue reports from agriculture and employment, from employment agencies, from national health, clinic records, education and school records, surveys conducted in the community, and others. Now, critical assumption here is there is a consistent support to the improvement, maintenance, and operations of the telecenters. And the third level is, for the log frame matrix, you will see here the results that you're expecting during this time frame of the project. You can measure this later on, just right after the project or the activity had been completed. For instance, increase public access to information of villagers on the livelihood, employment, health, education, social, and government services. And you can verify this by the number of villagers using the telecenter, the number of farmers and fisher folks who gained knowledge, skills, in the improvement of farming and fishing, for instance, number of villagers who gained employment, number of businesses who have improved and established in the community, number of villagers informed and educated about health concerns in the community, number of teachers and students using the telecenters, number of women and men is disaggregated by sex and age. And you can verify this through attendance records, participation registry, logbooks, surveys and interviews, records from local government agencies, e-registry, telehealth programs, and of course, the critical assumption follows, and that is there is social acceptability and trust in the use of ICTs. Villagers are willing to participate in the organizing of activities. Government and local information are relevant and updated. There are local champions who are consistently supporting this project all throughout the activities. And for the fourth level, you will see here some of the major activities of the project. One is to conduct a baseline study in the community, design and implement telecenter project, participatory organizing and development of the community, government services integrated in the community telecenter, install the appropriate technology that you will need in this community. And this can be verified by those records that we have said earlier. And the inputs will include technical assistance, the equipment and hardware, software that you will be inputting in the project, maybe government funds and other funds coming from donor organizations. And there would be lump sum costs and reimbursable expenses. Now, critical assumptions here would be government at the national and local levels maintain funding in the pre-project level and also funding in real terms. Now, also another critical assumption is there's a suitably qualified staff willing to work in remote areas if the telecenter is going to be located in a remote area of your country. Now let us move to the next phase of the project, which is the planning phase. The assumption here is that you've already identified the project and the scope that you will cover. So, see here in this graphical presentation, we are coloring in purple the planning phase. This is where we are, okay? And what it also covers for the system's development life cycle would be the requirements and design phase. Now, there's a lot of preparation also that you need in planning. Preparation of the project implementation plan would be the output here, and also the project charter for others. these would be the milestones. Now, these should be supported by a feasibility study or a viability analysis, and these will include policies that support or do not support the project, technological issues and requirements, organizational issues and requirements, financial issues and requirements, the cost-benefit analysis, the legal feasibility of this project, operational feasibility, and also the schedule feasibility. So this will have to be done or prepared before we can go into the planning phase. So here you will see in the next slide a review of the different areas of discipline like scope, time, cost, integration, quality, human resource, communications, risk, procurement. All these are what you need to plan for in the detailed project implementation plan. You will notice here that in the initiation phase, the scope is what is important. This would be the highlight of this phase of the project cycle. But in the planning phase, you will see here a lot of activities, a lot of planning to do, particularly those in the areas of discipline, such as scope planning, scope definition, activity definition, activity sequencing, activity duration estimating, scheduling of the activities and the release of resources or acquisition of resources, cost estimating, cost budgeting, project plan development, quality planning, organizational planning, communications planning, risk identification, risk quantification, the risk response development, procurement planning, solicitation planning, and all others. Now, you will see the same, what you have planned here in details will be those that you will implement during the project implementation phase. That's why it is very important for us to have length of time, considerable length of time to do planning. The project planning phase begins with the output initiation. The output is a project charter or what we call a detailed scope statement, and also at this point you will need to hire a project manager. The time that the project manager will be on board, the better. The phase covers what will be done, how, in what order, at what cost, what output is expected, and the work plan that you will have to consider and list during this time. It ends with the final formulation of the project implementation plan. Now, remember, the milestone is to have this project implementation plan approved. Okay, the project implementation plan provides a detailed description of the activities to be undertaken by the project. This involves the resource requirements, the implementation schedule, and the financial requirement of the project. The preparation of a project charter includes the following tasks: definition of project outputs, the breakdown of each output into work packages, and the activities and the tasks, definition of the logical relationship of project activities, the creation of a network of charts, the definition of the resource requirements for each task identified, then estimation of the duration per task, in which case it can and it will result to a bar chart to illustrate a project schedule. Now we need to estimate the project's cost and the requirements, financial requirements at this point. The range of project planning involves all the areas of disciplines. It also involves a lot of requirements that users and the beneficiaries of a project. Now, remember, the planning output is a project implementation plan or the project charter. Now, this involves, as I said, a detailed description of the technical and resource requirements, the schedules, financial requirements, the identification of tasks for every activity. I also, just for review, we also discussed that we may have to conduct a feasibility or viability analysis of this project. Areas that need to be looked into would be the conformity to the development and environmental objectives, priorities of the countries, the policies that support or do not support the project, as I said earlier, technological issues, finding out if the methodology is scientifically sound, is it best among available alternatives, are the technology needs and proposed processes necessary, how much it will cost, what are the organizational issues and needs that you will be expecting in the project. Will they be administratively manageable? What structure is most appropriate? Will there be maintenance or need after the project? Who will serve under the project? Are they qualified? Are there qualifications of the project team that you need to come up with? Who will manage? What are the staffing needs? And the market or customer issues, do the outputs have adequate demands? What is the current demand for the product? What is the current demand for the service proposed? How many will make use of this product and services? What are the target users or markets for this product or service? What are the demographic characteristics of potential users? What is the projected supply of the service or product needed? What competition exists in the market? Can a market niche be established? Is the location likely affecting success? And financial issues and requirements would include, is the project financially justifiable and feasible? What is the startup cost, the operating cost, the revenue projections, sources of financing, the profitability of the benefit? And in the legal feasibility there, you will also have to look into the legal impediments if there will be any. What about operational feasibilities? How will the new system be affecting people's lives? Will the schedule be viable? Will there be a more preferred time frame? Once the feasibility study is done, all this range of planning for this project planning part or phase will be easier to do because you are clear that the project is viable and the project must be underway. Now we have to recall that in the systems development cycle, the lingo used in ICT projects for planning include requirement specifications. Now, requirement specification is an important activity in ICT project management. These are parts wherein you have to produce project deliverables, rather plan those project deliverables. They are either functional or non-functional. The functional requirements refer to the daily requirements of the end users for the product. Non-functional requirements are Covert requirements not obvious to the user's use of the product, such as performance, the usability, the reliability, security, the financial functions, legal, operations, as well as other special functional and non-functional requirements. Now, other tools that can help us in the technical requirement or in the technical analysis would be some alternatives in the technical evaluation of parameters. You will see here that in the life cycle costs or life cycle system, the first order is already ensured that there must be effectiveness in the choice of the technical alternative. In the second order, there must also be system effectiveness for that particular choice of alternative. The third order is, what about system performance, operational availability, the dependability, capacity for growth? By cost, you have to look into, are there research and development costs? Are there investment costs required? Operational and support costs? Are there phase-out costs? Now, in the fourth order, you will see there the parameters will include accuracy, range, size and weight maybe, reliability and maintainability, speed, supportability, transportability. And in the cost, you will have to look into the design costs, the data cost, test and evaluation cost, manufacturing cost, inventory cost, maintenance cost, to name a few. And in the fifth order, for the technical alternative evaluation parameters, is it accessible? Are there diagnostic aids? Are there handling interchangeability? Are there logistical requirements, productivity, operational skills, safety, storage, utilities, and other testing requirements? Now here in this next slide, you will see an ICT requirement specification. You'll see here that the project is requiring reporting from branches of this particular agency, government agency, and whatever is going to be the output of the branch reports will have to be placed or inputted in the software database systems. Now, these database systems or software system will enable the data to be stored into a larger repository system. Now, you may use a software application here, and in doing so, as an output, all this data can be accessed in the National Development Office or National Central Office, where certain reports, analysis, and decision-making can be made. Now, there are some tools that can help you in the planning phase. One of these is the work breakdown structure. The other one is called the Gantt chart. And another one could be the resource allocation matrix. In the work breakdown structure, this is a process wherein you try to cluster and divide all the work packages together, identifying the major project components and subsystems, and after which you also try to differentiate and find out what the tasks, what the work packages are under those major project components. Now you can go down as far as level 6, wherein the activity or the task or sub-work could be enough for you to cost your project. For example, you have here a work breakdown structure. You are going to develop a management information software system. The major components would be a gap analysis, requirement specification, systems engineering, and systems design. If you notice, they're all numbered into under 200, 210, 220, 230, and 240 respectively. Now, under each major component, you have those other work packages which includes a breakdown of your major component. For example, in gaps analysis, you have under that activity would be needs assessment, measure state of current system, determine additional capability requirements, develop alternative approaches, and so on. You can list all the activities also under this as you wish. And so on. In 220, you will see requirement specification. It will involve development of preliminary software specifications, detailed software specifications, preliminary software specifications. And you can go to the next major component, which is systems engineering, which will involve development of alternative software approaches, alternative hardware approaches, cost estimates, the determination of the best technical and most cost-effective approach. And of course, next will be systems design, where you have the development of preliminary system design, which will include the design of the software modules, hardware subsystems, the integration of these systems, and the development of detailed subsystems. The other tool is the planning of the work resources and costs. Now, this tool is a matrix which, once you have identified the work breakdown structure, you are now able to identify the number of days that you will use this, who will do the work, the other resources that you need in this work package, the cost of the work that will be done, and the outputs and the deliverables. So, once you have filled this up, you can now also use the scheduler, or what we call a Gantt chart. Here in the next slide, you have a sample Gantt chart wherein you will see a matrix of schedules of activities. Now here in this example, you have the activities in one column, and on the other columns, you will already identify the number of weeks, months that you will have to use in order to implement these activities that are identified. Now that you have already identified the project, you have initiated it, you can now start writing your project plan. And it will be good for you to come up with an outline. And this slide here is a sample of a project plan outline. And you will see here a summary or abstract, a project description, the general description, the project objectives, the project fit with strategic goals. This will include technical requirements and approaches, contractual requirements, resource requirements, and then you can also describe your resources, who are the people that you will need, what will be the equipment that you will need, the materials, the schedules that will be included as you go through the identification of the resources in the outline. Now you can also show a master schedule where you will have a summary of how long the period of the project will take. And you can also have under these a detailed phase of the schedule. You can also show a milestone chart, a deliverable schedule, other required schedules, for example, schedules, let's say, of the consultants, the resources that you will need during the entirety of the project. Now, you'll also, after that, show the cost estimate and the budget, potential risk, evaluation criteria, and all of this should be written as briefly as possible, and anything of large data requirement or large data presentation will have to be placed in the annexes. The annexes will include systems engineering management plan, the risk plan, the communication plan, logistics and other purpose plans, terms of reference, and all others that will be important as part of your project implementation plan. Now, here in the next slide, you will see that project management phases are not all that linear, and this cycle can also have a deviation in terms of planning. After you have done all your plans, definitely the next activity is to execute these plans. Now, in the execution of the plans, it could be possible that we will also see certain challenges or certain problems which will require us to go back to the drawing board or replan activities and strategies so that there's enough time for us to still recover, do things that are more necessary in the project. So part of the activity of the project manager is actually to do a lot of planning. So it is important for the manager to monitor what is going on in the project so that if there's a need to replan with the team and other members of the stakeholders and so with other partners, you are able to do so.